I think agents spend so much time thinking and planning and how should I do it and what should I do? They end up talking themselves out of it. But I think the key to success in business is the execution.
Work FOMO is always worse than personal life FOMO. In your personal life, right, there's always another party or trip or event, but work FOMO is really hard because it kind of lives with you forever. If we could just help make agents more successful, would we be successful? And the answer was yes.
Welcome back to another episode of Rise Above the Ranks. I'm your host, James Harris, and today I'm joined by Rory Golod, who is the President of Growth at Compass International Holdings. Rory has built a career behind the scenes that had an outsized impact on the entire real estate industry, helping scale one of the most influential brokerages in the entire world. And Rory has been a part of how we shape thousands of agents and how they operate every single day. He's known for moving with intention and discipline and a true long-term mindset. His path is a powerful example of what it looks like to grow without cutting corners and to lead without actually needing the spotlight, which is remarkable. Rory, thank you for joining, my friend. Lovely to have you on the podcast today. How are you doing before we jump right in?
Well, thank you for having me. I loved that intro. I need you to do that more often for me as I travel.
You need that before you walk in at night with your wife, right?
Yeah, 24/7. I could use that reinforcement. I'm doing really well, though. Doing really well.
That's awesome, man. And so you're based out of New York, is that correct?
I am. I'm based out of New York City. I travel often, so I'm on the road probably 2 to 3 days a week. But New York is my home base.
Wow, 2-3 days a week you're on the road. You must have a lot of air miles.
I do. A lot of air miles, status, train status, the whole thing. So
well, it's awesome. You're doing it for a good cause. You joined Compass, I believe, back in 2014. Definitely, right. But before what it became, what it is today. My first question to you, Rory, is what on earth drew you to that company at that early stage?
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, let's go back to 2014. We weren't even Compass. Yeah. We were Urban Compass. We were a tiny little startup in New York City. We obviously had big dreams and aspirations, but it was such a different size company, but also just in terms of when you're just starting and you're a startup, you're really just trying to figure it out every day. And so, back then the company was small. We had about 20 employees and 20 agents. The whole company could fit into, a tiny office. And what drew me was really a few things. I mean, when I looked at the company, I sort of asked myself, one, is the opportunity big? Like, is this a big enough opportunity if this company is successful? And success at that time was just if they could just, make a slight dent into that business, would they be successful? Obviously, residential real estate is massive. So the opportunity was really big. The other question I just, add was, is this the team that can do it? The quality of the people. And, when I was meeting people at the company and sort of considering if I wanted to join or not, it was very apparent to me that the quality of the talent was exceptional. Mm-hmm. I remember telling a friend of mine, I think the way to think about this is if this company tomorrow pivoted and did something completely different, would they be successful? And I would have said the answer is yes, just because the quality of the people and how capable and smart they were, I sort of felt like they could do anything. It just so happened real estate was the focus.
Yeah. So,
those two things really drew me to it. And then obviously the third thing was, meeting Robert Refkin and getting to know him. And, him and I had shared a mutual friend that had introduced us. And, I remember we spent about 10 minutes together in the interview. I wouldn't even call it an interview. I think he asked me two questions. One, do you want to change the world? And obviously I said yes. I think you have to say yes to that question. Yeah. And two was, what's the percentage of time you spend executing versus planning?
Yeah.
And I remember I was trying to feel him out of what answer did he want. The truth of the matter was, I was definitely more of an execution first person and said, look, 90% execution. And he was like, great, that's exactly what we're looking for. And then I think we spoke for another couple minutes and then that was it. And that was a Friday, I believe. And then Monday I joined in December of 2014. So that's what initially drew me to the company.
Damn, that you gave me goosebumps hearing that. And by the way, what a great question, execution or planning. And it's so similar in our actual everyday business as agents. I think agents spend so much time thinking and planning and how should I do it and what should I do? They end up talking themselves out of it. But I think the key to success in business is the execution. And my God, did you execute 20 people to, is it 340,000 agents across 120 countries today?
Yeah, you got it right. That is now as Compass International Holdings. So since our deal with Anywhere closed, we're now in over 120 countries and have approximately 340,000 agents. So
honestly, I've been like your PR from the back line here. I think what you guys have done is genius. I've been watching every move, every step you guys have made. And you're disrupting an industry, a $500 billion industry, and you're capitalizing on it and shaking it up at a time that I think is just perfect. But let's get into the before Compass, right? Before real estate, you were in analytics and strategy. If I'm not mistaken, you were at Bloomberg and Yext. How did that early exposure to things like data and operations help shape how you think about growth today?
You know, it was interesting. So when I graduated college, I worked at Yext, which was actually one of the first startups that came out of New York City that actually not only built and scaled, but went public. And so it's an experience I'm really proud of because I joined Yext in late 2008, early 2009. So this was long before the concept of startups was, sort of part of our popular vernacular. And certainly New York City had not developed a real startup scene like Silicon Valley had at that point.
Right.
And so working there for a couple of years, that was an incredible experience, getting to work alongside Brian Distelberger, one of the co-founders who's still a friend, and Howard Lerman, who founded the company. It was a real sort of like hands-on front row seat to building a company in the days where, again, that wasn't the sort of obvious, exciting path that it is today, where so many people are sort of dead set on, I want to work at a startup, I want to go there. And I sort of gathered from that experience that I liked being in a company where my impact mattered.
Yeah.
When you're in a smaller company to start, you get the chance to kind of do a little bit of everything. And it's a gift in that you get exposure, and that exposure, if you do well, can lead to other opportunities. The curse, which I don't consider a curse, but the other side of that is you get exposure to a lot of things. And so you have a lot of responsibilities. You have to move fast. You have to be relentless. You have to have an intense work ethic. And I learned a lot, working alongside people at that company and sort of what this could be. And so incredibly proud of that experience. I then went to work at Bloomberg, which I think everyone needs at some point in their life to work at a large corporation, because there's a lot, sometimes they get a bad rap, but there's a lot you can learn from them. They're large, successful corporations for a reason, right? Yep. And that was an amazing experience. But after a couple of years there, I got the bug again. And I felt like I really want to do something that's just more entrepreneurial, that has more impact for me personally. And again, I think it was meeting Robert. I remember coming home after meeting him and telling my, now wife, then girlfriend, I said this verbatim. I said, I think he is going to actually, he asked me if I want to change the world. I think he's going to change the world. I don't know how, but I think what's actually going to happen is over the coming years, we're going to read about this company. We're going to read about them. And every time I read about them, if I don't pursue this opportunity, I'm going to get the worst FOMO. And I have this theory that work FOMO is always worse than personal life FOMO. In your personal life, right, there's always another party or trip or event. But work FOMO is really hard because it kind of lives with you forever. It can have financial implications. And I didn't want to read about the company every day and say, wow, that could have been.
Yeah.
And so, ultimately those experiences, I think they were obviously formative. You learn a lot, all of that. I think the biggest takeaway I had from those was I thought I knew what hard work was because I'd always been a hard worker. When I got to Compass, I think that's when I really unlocked, oh, okay, there are different gears and there are different levels to kind of how hard you can grind and how hard you can work. And I felt prepared but definitely it was eye-opening.
But listen, you're part of something. You were changing. If Robert thinks he's changing the world, right, and essentially he's actually changed an entire industry, and you're in on the ground floor and you want to have an impact, and you're a young guy and you've figured out, look, corporate America at Bloomberg isn't for me, but what a crazy experience. What perfect, impeccable timing to jump into something and be a part of something that can actually change an entire industry. And that is what you've done. So kudos to you. I want to know, going back to the early years, what mattered more? Was it instinct? Was it preparation? Was it being willing to learn fast? Because I can only imagine how quick everything was moving back then, and how you had to adapt and execute without sort of overthinking anything.
Yeah, the pace was definitely relentless. So moving fast was important. I think, we, in the earliest days of the company, these ideas of you want to change the world and you want to make an impact, and those were all things that matter. But I think very quickly, Robert sort of galvanized around this idea. Robert and Ori, both of them, the co-founders of the company, both galvanized around this idea that if we could just help make agents more successful, would we be successful? And the answer was yes, right? And that became this guiding light. And I think there were obviously a host of things that were important at that time. You had to be able to move fast. You had to be able to work hard. You had to be able to have a capacity to manage a lot of things and sort of do all that. But more than anything, I think the thing that was most important was, did you buy in and believe that agents were the customer, the client of the company? Meaning our business, our brokerage business, our sole reason for existing was only to help our clients being agents. We have this thing we say, we need to work as hard for them as they work for their clients. Yeah. And not only did you believe in that, because that wasn't actually a guarantee. There were some people who didn't want to do that. Some people who wanted I want to build for the consumer. I want to build for this audience. Like, you had to buy into this idea that agents were, and still are today, the client. And then second, could you actually put that in practice? Meaning, if you had an idea, were you willing to go sit with 10 agents and ask them, is this a good idea? Were you willing to say, you know what, before we launch this, let's actually get their feedback. Let's bring them into the process. And I very quickly realized that was actually the shortcut. Yeah. You always want to try to find shortcuts and efficiency. And I was like, wow, all these really smart, talented agents. And again, there weren't that many at that time in the company, but they're in our office. All I have to do is just walk up to them, tap them on the shoulder, and ask them, what is it that we should be doing? Is this a good idea? Is this a bad idea? Take their ideas and execute it, because they know better. They know the business. They are the ones doing it. Many of us were brand new to the industry at that point. So the instinct was probably just to not have the ego that says it needs to be my idea. Right? Like, if I didn't whiteboard this thing out nonstop till 4 a.m, then I am not capable. And that's not the case.
But you picked up on something. And listen, I don't know if you know this. I've been building a tech platform for agents.
I do. It's amazing.
Thank you. But my number one obsession has been obsessing over the real estate agent. Right. And you really hit the nail on the head. Like, your number one goal was putting the agent first. And you did that so early on, and you brought these agents in. It's like I'll give you an analogy. When we sell homes, or I sell a home to a developer who isn't the most experienced developer, and they hire the best architect, they still need the agent to talk about what the buyers see, what the floor plan looks like, what style's in, what furniture's in. The same way Compass can be as big as Compass is, but without the agents, you're not Compass. So you got to put the agents first. You got to build the agents. As important as the company is, as important as the consumers are. And you guys did that very, very early on. And I've seen that from afar. I've seen it from Robert over and over. Like, there is a true, I don't want to say obsession, it's the wrong word, but it is the right word.
There is an obsession. I mean,
yeah, like that's what it is. And I've watched it from afar, and it's been incredible to see the way you've held these agents in such high regard. And there's 1.6 million of us in the US. Like, that's a big market share. And now here you are with, I don't know how many in the US. I think it's about 30,000. That's a big obsession to have, and a lot of management to run.
I think there were a couple components to it. One, it was very easy for me, at least, to develop an emotional obsession and connection to the agents. Because one, I mean, they were physically in our office. They were inside the company. They weren't this foreign client that you never see, right? In some big consumer-facing companies where you have millions, hundreds of millions of customers, you never really connect. These are people who I was sitting next to. I got to know that, 11 years later, some of these people are my closest friends.
Totally.
And so it was very easy to connect them. Yeah, there's a real sense of community. There's also, they were exciting and impressive. I mean, I'm sitting there in the earliest days with, these are some of the top agents in the country. You think about New York City, people like Leonard Steinberg, Kyle Blackman, Scott Hustis and Mark Jovanovich, Julia Hoagland, Tony Haber, Clayton Arrigo, Stephen Ferrara. I mean, these people were almost like superstars to me because they were the best. They were the best in the world at what they did. And it was really inspiring to be around them. This wasn't like a client that you're like, oh, okay, these are the people I have to help out. And, all right, we'll figure this out. Like, they were pushing us, we were pushing them. And so it was very easy to develop that obsession. And then I'd say the third thing was, it very clearly was working, meaning when we would come up with ideas that we made up and just invented out of thin air, they tended to fail and they would flop.
Right.
And then when we actually, bingo. And it was like, when we listened to them and asked them, what is it that you need? What is it that we should do? And then we did those things. They were massive hits. And I was giving advice to a friend the other day who's starting a new job, in a pretty senior role at a company. I said, look, I think the best thing you can do is in your first number of months, there are going to be people who are like, oh, spend your first 100 days, like go around and talk to a bunch of people and learn. Sure. But that actually could end up being a waste of time if there's no purpose behind it. What I would just do is find 100 of the clients of this business, go sit with them in person, not a phone call, not virtual, in person, and ask them, what is it that you have now that you really like that we should do more of? What is it that you don't have that we need to build? What is it that someone else has that we don't like? What are those things? Show me, tell me exactly. And then invite them into that iterative process and tell them, I'm going to call you once a month to go through this because I want to get it right. Yeah. And take that list that you write down and hand that to your team and say, here's the roadmap for the next 1, 2, 3 years. Because 100%. If you just do that, you'll win.
100% listen to the customer, obsess over the customer, because the customer is going to give you the answer that you need. And that's that's the bottom line. And question, because you've had a few different roles at Compass, I believe, since you started.
Quite a few.
And then I believe at one point you were chief of staff to Robert Reffkin. I guess my question is, what did working that closely with an obsessed founder teach you about leadership? And I think I'm hearing a lot of that right now.
Yeah, probably.
Everything you say is probably a part of what you've learned in your journey. Same with me, by the way. The last 2 years of building something from the ground up, I've learned more in the last 2 years than I have the last 40. But what did you truly learn at the core, being side by side with Robert and understanding what the future looks like?
I mean, so much. That would be a whole separate podcast on
in everything. A nutshell, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I think, a couple of things. One, that experience being Robert's chief of staff was the greatest professional experience of my life by far. And probably in the top sort of 3 or 4 of personal, of taking out, having children, getting married, that sort of stuff.
You better say that.
Yeah.
Disclaimer.
My family's going to listen to this at some point. So they're fans of yours. So I know they're going to. So don't worry, guys. You guys are number one. But it was for a couple of reasons. I mean, one, the environment, the context was really unique because that was from basically 2016 to 2018. So I'd been at the company for about 2 years. The company, that was really in the hyper growth phase. That's when we started raising really large amounts of capital, raised money from SoftBank. We were opening a city a month, basically. We were traveling around the country nonstop. And so that environment was one that was incredibly exciting and infectious to me. Robert was an amazing person to work for in that environment because, one, he had and still has virtually no ego when it comes to ownership of things. And really in general, he is the most low ego person I've ever met. So sometimes I push him a little. I'm like, no, it's okay. You can lean into that. He's like, no. And what I mean by that is he was willing to say, look, if there's someone, whether it's me as his chief of staff or other people in the company who can do something or own it, great, do it, because that will then free me, being him, up to go do other things. So I was allowed to take on a lot. I was allowed to be in a lot of rooms that I probably at that early stage of my career, probably in any other environment, wouldn't have been in. And by being in those places, I got to learn so much. And I got to learn from watching him learn, right? Like this was his first time scaling a company and building a company and raising capital. And so, you know, we were making mistakes. He was making mistakes, but I was learning from them. And he was really good about sort of saying this, learn from my mistake in this area or learn from this thing. I also learned, as I said earlier, like the true value of hard work. I mean, he has the most relentless work ethic I've ever seen. And, you know, I was my stepfather, my father, I grew up around people who worked incredibly hard. You know, he had a different gear. And every time I thought I was sort of at that level, it's like you're driving in a race and like you're alongside the car next to you. And then all of a sudden you're like, great, I've got up to them. We're doing 180 miles an hour. And then like, they just hit the gas a little more and then they just speed up and you're like, okay, there's levels to it. And
I'm smiling because I'm so familiar with that level of obsession. And it's so funny. Often when I'm just going at 5 million miles an hour, I think of this one particular friend of mine who just is on another level. And I'm like, what would he be saying right now? What would he be doing right now? And so it's always, I think it's actually good to have someone that's sort of challenging your level, because I think we as human beings can go much harder than we think we can go.
Totally. And the thing with Robert is it wasn't just a relentless, you have to go work 24/7. And, you know, he had the same sort of approach to his focus on his family.
An example is about to bring that up, actually.
Right. So when I was his chief of staff, I didn't have children yet. So for me, I had a lot more flexibility and honestly a lot more capacity and time. We would take red eyes all the time. And they used to drive me nuts because I love my sleep and I hate red eyes. And so we would take red eyes all the time. And we took them because, again, he wanted to, there was one side of it's like, it's more efficient. We can be back in the office the next day. But actually, the real reason he wanted to take them, I didn't realize this till a couple months in, was because he wanted to be able to show up, land in New York from California, and then, or Seattle or somewhere else on the West Coast, and then take his daughters to school. And at the time, I knew how meaningful it was because obviously those are his kids, but I didn't have kids myself. And I was sort of fascinated by his ability to just go all in on this thing that was Compass. And then the other thing he was then also going all in on was his family, because he was like, I'm going to be back home to take them to school. Over the weekend, all I'm doing is hanging with my kids if it's not work. And that focus, now as a father of two, I get it, because now I'm like, okay, what's the flight where I could get out so I could get on? Maybe I'll
now you get it. Now you get it.
And so I think there's sometimes something in sort of our culture that's like, you have to be all in on work ethic has to be 150% and nothing else matters. The reality is it's not actually, I think, the right way to go about it. It's go all in on something, make something your main thing, give it everything, but you can have capacity for some other things. And hopefully
I think healthy balance is so, I really think a healthy balance is just so important. And yes, you got to be back. Like for me, I don't want to wake up one day and my kids are both 20 years of age. I don't want to miss those milestone moments, but I also know what creating success looks like. And I'm not an idiot to understand what I need to do in order to achieve that. And I'll add, and this is not an advertisement so that my wife hears it, but none of it's possible without a wife or a partner that understands what the North Star looks like and what you're trying to achieve. And I always say, like, without my wife, I wouldn't be where I am today. Truly.
100%. I think it's actually, you mentioned community. I think it's, you need your support system. And people always say you need a support system. A support system also is just a group of people that understand what you're trying to do and help you do that. And sometimes helping you is not getting in your way.
Yeah.
Meaning, you know, I'm sure your wife, when you're really working hard and grinding, she gets it. Like there's a purpose. So that's one less person that's sort of putting pressure on you. I'm lucky my wife does that with me. I would say even my siblings and my family. There were a lot of times, especially in the early days, there's still a little now, but I've gotten a little better, where it's family dinner, we're hanging out on Sundays, doing things, and I am on the phone. I'm on my computer. Everyone's over here. I have to go in the other room. And they never once, you know, they'd give me a hard time a little bit, but they understood that this really mattered to me.
Yeah. And you're trying to create something, you know?
You're trying to create something. Exactly. And so I think that's, if you have that, then it almost gives you that sort of ability in that space to be like, okay, I can really lock in and go for what I'm doing.
Yeah, none of it's possible without the backbone, which is the family. But I do have another question, and that's into, you know, we're talking about scaling, right? And here we are. I don't know the statistic of how many offices you have or how many cities you're in, but you were obviously largely involved in launching and leading a lot of these major regions. Mm-hmm. My question, and it's a question I have to this day, is how do you grow this fast without losing culture, right? Because that, you know, the idea of being at Compass is, to me, extraordinary from an exposure standpoint, but you're the opposite of a boutique. How do you do that and still keep that culture? Because I feel like, especially post-COVID, right? Culture is everything and it's important. I see it from afar, but not being at Compass, I guess I don't understand it. How do you balance the two?
Yeah, I have so many phrases and sayings for this. My colleague Netta Navab, she always says big and boutique, which I like, because, like, again, you want the best of both. Everyone theoretically wants the benefits of a big company. They want the feel of a boutique. You know, Leonard Steinberg always says high tech, high touch. So there's all sorts, like, how do you get that marriage of the two? Look, one of the reasons why I think we have such a relentless work ethic and we work so hard, one of the reasons we're on the road, Robert's on the road multiple times a week, I am, Netta, many of our leaders, is because we want the culture to feel special still. We want it to feel small. We want to feel connected. And if people see you in their office, if you show up and you're in front of them, and they can get in touch with you and they call you and you answer, and if you miss their call, you call them back that same day, then actually the size of the company sort of becomes irrelevant. And I think great leaders can maintain culture even as a company grows. And so in the early days, culture was actually a competitive advantage for us. Our technology in the earliest days wasn't yet built. We didn't have market share. There were a lot of markets. People were like, Compass who, right? Yeah. The brand wasn't where it was. So there were all these things we didn't have yet. But one of the things we did have was culture. It was this idea that it was an environment that was exciting, that moved fast, that focused on the agent, that cared about community, that cared about people being in the office together, looking to your left and right and being inspired by the agents in your office or the leaders in your office. So we had that in the early days. And basically a lot of our time now is just maintaining that. And it's why, you know, if you follow me or Robert or our leaders on social media, one of the reasons why you see us in a different city all the time.
It's remarkable, by the way. Just FYI, yeah.
We're trying to maintain that. That's why every agent at the company has our cell phone numbers, right? That's why every agent at the company can email any of us and get an immediate response. And so one of our big focuses is just how do we maintain that culture? And I think it's just, do you care enough? Are you willing to put in enough effort to do it? The other thing was, if you just lean in and put the effort in, you're going to get there.
Yeah.
The other thing is being in person. Now, pre-COVID, this was not a thing, right? If I would have said, hey, Compass is great because we're all in person, you know, you would have been like, well, of course, like that's our business. Post-COVID, as we know, that's not an assumed fact. And so we were really aggressive about bringing people back to office. We started very early. We started in late 2022. There were a lot of people who disagreed with that. But we knew that that's what made a culture great. The concept of a virtual culture is sort of an oxymoron.
Totally.
And I think a lot of our agents respected that we were really early in pushing to be like, no, our employee team, we're going to be in the office 5 days a week. And I encourage our agents all the time, like, come into the office. So yes, obviously you need to be out in the field, but when you're not out in the field working with clients, being in the office, it's not just good for your business, it's also good for your state of mind and for culture. And so I think, right, so focusing on it and caring about it, making it a thing that we actually measured and mattered, being relentless about being in person, I think those are the things that helped to kind of keep it and maintain it. And now we're in a world where now with Compass and Anywhere coming together, I think we have this amazing opportunity to continue to spread that and maybe in some cases prove some people wrong, because I think some people are assuming that just because the company is getting bigger, that the culture will dissipate. I've heard some people assume that, oh, well, the culture is going to change. It's not. Why is that? There are big companies that are amazing places to work, and there are small companies that are terrible places to work, and vice versa. It actually has nothing to do with the size of the company.
It's how it's run.
Yeah, it's how exactly. And it's like, it's sort of, what are, the expectations you have of each other, and do you create those environments for people to come together? Do you do events? Do you create excuses for people to be connected? And if you do those things, usually you end up in the right place.
And not to sound naive, but do you guys do events? Do you do it West Coast, East Coast? Like, how do you figure out what event are we going to do this week or month or quarter?
Yeah.
That is a great way to bring these people together.
We do a lot of events. So, in the Compass brokerage, there are all sorts of events. There are regional events. We call it Connecting the Dots, where we invite people in regions to come together. Awesome. We do an annual retreat where we pick a different city and invite thousands of agents to. I just came back from actually an amazing event. It was in Boulder, Colorado last week. I was in Philly on Wednesday at a Connecting the Dots event for the greater sort of Philly Mid-Atlantic region. Then I went to Boulder on Thursday. And then on Friday, I flew to Jackson Hole for the Compass Alpine Club, which is the Compass Ski Club, for their event in Jackson Hole. And so that's a great example. That was an event. The company didn't plan that. That was actually a group of agents that got together and built out this Compass Alpine Club and invited agents from across the country. And we had about 50 agents from across the country, some employees as well, who came. And it was just an organic thing. And so we do a lot of events. Awesome. Then we also, our other brands are doing a ton of events. Coldwell Banker has a number of events. I'm going to the Century 21 event in a couple of weeks in Vegas. I was just at the ERA event, Fuel in Austin, Texas. Sotheby's is doing events. All of our brands, Christie's, At Properties, I mean, they're all doing events. And the way to actually do it without being overwhelming is just empower the local leaders. Yeah. And basically say, okay, what do you think is the right sort of way to do this? And then the company at a corporate level owns a couple of the biggest ones. Yeah. And so you get a mix of big events. Some people like going to those. Some people also want to go to an event where there are only 50 people.
100%. People like it both ways. But again, you're bringing it right back to the agent to create it and bring the people and create community. And that's what it's about. Question for you, the Compass Anywhere merger. I sat back and I laughed. I was like, this is genius. How did this not get out? I don't know how you guys kept that lid on that, but it was just brilliant. But once you did that merger, if I'm not mistaken, and please correct me if I'm wrong, you essentially overnight became the largest residential brokerage in the world. What does that milestone mean to you, to Robert, to your co-founder? What does that actually mean to the whole Compass team? Because that's a big moment in time right there.
Yeah, that's probably another podcast. So we're gonna have to do that one too.
Again, in a nutshell, like that has to be a moment in time where it
was. I mean, look, the morning of September 22nd is a morning I'll never forget. The week prior was actually really wild because to your point, you're trying to get this thing done. You don't want it to leak. the Compass team and the Anywhere team, that week was the first time we'd ever connected and started working together. And so we're kind of in this mad dash to figure out how are we going to do this. And you're trying to coordinate it across all these different brands, all these different stakeholders, and effectively, how do you deliver this message and make it a message that people feel really good about? Because we felt great about it. But it was such a big message that how do you land that? And in those first couple days, I had a really good sense that this would work and would be successful, because what I watched and observed was that our teams were actually collaborating really well, which again is not a given. This is not just a talking point, right?
Yeah.
When you merge companies, when you acquire companies, and I've seen both examples of this. Somewhere like everyone collaborates very easily, everyone slots in, and it's so easy. And then you have other examples where some people are reticent. They're not really happy about it. They're worried about it. Their worst fears are the things that are sort of circling in their mind, and it just becomes really hard. And so early on in that sort of week leading up to it, we were actually working really well together and making really good progress on trying to tackle all these complicated things. And so I was cautiously optimistic, let's say. Then we announce, and it was a huge milestone. I mean, for us, again, for me, I was thinking back to the day I walked in 2014, and we had 40 people in the whole company. Wow. So it was definitely an incredibly big milestone. But for me, I was actually more excited. I live in the future often, so I have a hard time being present. I was more excited about what it could mean going forward. And then, throughout the fall, I was confident, and I think our leaders, we were all confident that agents would be excited about this. There would certainly be the need to explain why there should be excitement. You had agents from Compass who didn't want to feel like the company that they were a part of was going to change and was going to, all of a sudden, are we becoming this big, this big company that is not the essence, the culture, as you said, of what we loved. And then I think, had agents from the other brands from Anywhere that were also probably feeling the same thing and worried, oh my goodness, are things going to change? Are things going to go away? What's going to happen? And so in the fall, we put out, Robert put out a letter where he said, look, we want to be really clear and provide insight into this. We're not getting rid of brands. We're not forcing people to do private exclusives. We're going to give everyone the opportunity to use the technology platform, but it's up to them if they want. I mean, a lot of that just mirrors our entire push on seller choice. It was just agent choice. And then, since the start of this year, my excitement and confidence has only been lifted. I said this a couple of weeks ago, speaking on a panel, and I said, there were some people who were sort of, let's say, taking some shots, if you will, at the merger. And I said, I wish you could see what I see every day.
Yeah.
Right? Because what I see every day is not just now our leaders. It's not just, myself and Netta and folks from Compass collaborating with people like Sue Yannicone and Tanya and Rich DiNicola, and all these leaders from Anywhere who were formerly at a different company, who are now, we're all working together and collaborating. It's not just at the leader level, it's also now down at the employee level, and even in some cases at the agent level. And so I'm seeing this firsthand that it's working.
And so seeing it work, it's nothing make you happier.
No, look, we still have a ton of work to do. We're rolling out the technology platform to the owned and operated brands this summer. We'll be rolling it out to the affiliates and franchises next year. There's still a lot of work to do. There's a lot of stuff we got to figure out, and we're going to make mistakes and mess things up for sure. But I think that's the thing that actually makes me the happiest, that it's working and that we're gelling, because as excited as I would have been back in September, I could tell you, oh my goodness, that was the greatest moment ever. But if today I was sitting here and it was a mess, it wouldn't have really mattered. Yeah.
I think you said it best. You will make mistakes along the way, but it's how you grow from those mistakes and how you course correct them. I mean, look, from an outside perspective, as someone that's not at Compass, that's watching from afar, the acquisition made all the sense in the world. No doubt, as you said, the tech stack that Compass has will roll out to the Anywhere brand, and so it will be one tech stack integrated for all of your agents. It doesn't sound from the outside that you're trying to change Sotheby's and Coldwell Banker to Compass.
No.
So I think those agents' minds and
not
their
at all
opinions are alleviated. But listen, you are trying to create change, and you are disrupting an industry for the better. And not everyone's going to like it. Some people are going to hate it, and others are going to love it. But if you're course correcting for the better and good of our industry, I'm here for it, support it, and I think it's fantastic. So,
well, it's interesting. People often say disrupt. It's funny. It's a word we actually don't like because it implies like a negative outcome, right? Robert often will say, "I'm not trying to disrupt. All we want to do is actually make it better, uplift, improve." Our whole focus is, can we just improve the experience for the agents that are part of our company, and then therefore their clients? And again, just getting back to that sort of North Star, if we can do that, if we can help agents realize their entrepreneurial potential, then we'll be successful. And so everything is about.
But I the only part I counter, and by the way, it is what it is. I don't think that disruption is always associated with negativity. I think there's positive disruption. And I do think our industry is I'll be blunt. I think our industry, it's a $500 billion industry. Look at data. The whole thing's a complete mess. People are working off spreadsheets.
No, you're right. There is some, I could think of some good disruption, maybe on even giving sellers choice, on giving agents choice.
I want to get into that. I really do. Because this whole situation with antitrust clear cooperation and Zillow and this disaster that's happening is mind-boggling to me. And then you come out with another massive swing with your Zillow madness, but now the Redfin partnership, which was another genius move, and 60 million eyeballs on one listing, I think was the number, and everyone in uproar. Correct me if I'm wrong. The consumer decides if they want their property listed or not listed. So where's the I'm super confused, but let me. The whole thing's
I very
ridiculous.
much agree with you.
But there's been a lot of conversation around Compass's legal battle with Zillow and how these listings are shown online. I guess, what's the core idea you hope people take away from that fight, and what the future of your partnership with Redfin looks like, which to me is absolutely genius?
So first, to answer your first question, you just said exactly what the core of this whole thing is, which is your question: shouldn't the seller be able to decide how they want to sell and market their home? It's almost so basic and so simple that it's laughable, right? It's insane that we are actually having to defend that concept, right? So our entire premise from day one has just been seller choice and agent choice. That's it. Entities that are not the government, right? MLSs are private companies. Portals like Zillow are private companies. Private companies are not the government. They shouldn't be able to regulate an industry and force sellers and agents to do something they don't want to do. The only entity in the world that can force us to do things we don't want to do is the government. Correct. And so it's very puzzling, and frankly, I think it's frustrating that we're even still talking about this. And I think the only reason why we're talking about it is because many of these entities feel like their business model is threatened by us advocating for seller and agent choice. And again, the fiduciary responsibility is not to the business model of an MLS or NAR or a portal. The fiduciary responsibility when you're selling someone's home is to the seller, right? And so that should be where we're focused. This was never about, I'll go through all the things we've heard, right? Compass is just doing this double end deals. We could care less about double ending deals. I can't even tell you how many we've ever done. We don't track it. It doesn't matter to us. It's not why we're doing this. It also doesn't make any sense because in a world of buyer broker agreents,
it's the brokerage stupidest argument.
Yeah, exactly.
I want to hear one good argument.
That makes no sense. Compass is just doing this to wall off their inventory. Well, we've been fighting to put all our listings online as coming soons for everyone to see. If you go back before Clear Cooperation in 2019, we had thousands of coming soons, which were on compass.com for the world to see. We had a tiny, tiny amount of private exclusives. Clear Cooperation is the thing that forced all those coming soons, which were on the internet for everyone to see, effectively underground, to become private exclusives, because we had to follow that mandate, right? Yeah. And obviously now we're not following that because it's directly in conflict with the fiduciary duty of the agent and their client. There was, this whole thing about, oh, this is a fair housing thing. That's laughable. Also, that implies that minorities aren't able to go on the internet and find a property and call an agent and work with them, which, it's not a fair housing issue. We know that. All of these reasons were never actually why we were doing this. We were doing this because our industry, like any industry, should be based on competition. And competition is always going to be what's going to create the best experience for the client in that business. Yeah. And that will drive the business. And we are a business where agents are competing. They want to offer their clients more choices. Every seller wants more choices, not fewer. Right. No seller is like, give me the one size fits all mandated approach to selling the most important asset in the world to me. And so it's always been about more choices, and we should be competing on that. And there might be companies that come up with something that's better than what we came up with. Okay, great. Then that will push us to want to get better. I've used this example when we were building the company. Imagine in 2015 or 2016, when we weren't in these markets, we didn't have any market share. If we would have raised our hand and said, hey, and went to the MLS or NAR portal and said, this is not fair. We don't have any market share. We don't have any top agents. We're not established yet. We need a system to make it so that we can be that. Everyone would have laughed. They would have said, what are you talking about? Go out there and build it. And if you can build it, then you'll achieve it. And so that's what this is about. And the partnership with Redfin, one, I think Rocket and Redfin understand the value of a great agent. They understand the value of seller choice. They understand the value of competition. And so this partnership allows for the coming soons that are coming from Compass and then eventually from all the agents in our portfolio to go to redfin.com, to be promoted to the top of search in that market in Redfin. And for, as you said, over 60 million people to see it. And for the agent's name and their brokerage brand to be on their listing, for the backlink to go to their listing, and for the inquiry to go to that agent. And prior to yesterday, that concept was one that was not widely appreciated in this industry and almost seemed so foreign, which again, doesn't make any sense. Of course, the listing agent, their contact information should be on there. Of course, the lead should go to them. It's their listing. Right. And so I'm really happy that Zillow decided to reverse their Zillow ban and decide to recognize that seller choice and agent choice matters and compete. And so
I really appreciate you explaining this all the way you did, by the way, because I don't think a lot of people hear it, understand it the way you've just laid it all out. To me, as an agent that's been doing this for 25 years, if I work on a property, it could be $1 million, $5 million, $20 million, $100 million, and the seller wants this property off market and they don't want it anywhere, then you respect that and you do your very best for whatever that reason may be to sell it quietly. But if a seller wants the exposure without accumulating days on market, or they want to test a certain price point, or they want to put it out and see what happens, why should they be held back on limits and restrictions of how they can sell their own property? It is actually insane to me that we're even having this conversation.
That's absolutely right.
Correct me if I'm, and I could be completely wrong. Didn't Zillow just go against their entire argument with Compass by now joining up and doing exactly what you just did? Am I missing something? Genuinely.
That is absolutely correct. For the last year, all of the rhetoric, all of the noise, all of the things that came to light in the publicly released documents from
they've gone
our
against
lawsuit.
in a week of you doing this deal. I don't get it.
Exactly, which I think tells you this was never about transparency. This was never about the consumer. This was never about, Rob Hahn had a fabulous article he put out yesterday about this. This appears that this was just about their business model and protecting their business model. And, you were talking about off market. It's so funny. If you really go back, if you listen to the things that we say, we never actually really talk about this concept of off market, because we actually are not telling people to sell off market.
Yeah.
94% of our private exclusives end up on the market.
Of course.
This is only just about giving people the choice. So as you just said, if you want to pre-market your property, not accumulate days on market.
Yeah.
If you want to get pricing right, Steve Scholl, amazing real estate coach, says pre-marketing, private exclusives coming soon, it's actually the best pricing tool. It's all about getting pricing right. And so that's what this is all about. If our agents never want to sell a home off market ever again, that's totally fine. Like that, it's just about their ability to be creative and have different marketing strategies.
I'm going to tell you something quickly, Rory, because I come from a world in the UK where we don't have an MLS. And there isn't a listing meeting that I go on or somebody on my team goes on where I say to a seller, the MLS can be your best friend and it can also be your worst enemy. Why? Because the second you go live on the MLS, you start accumulating days on market. The longer a property sits on the MLS, the more detrimental it becomes to you, because after a certain period of time, it goes stale and buyers start to think, well, why hasn't it sold? What's wrong with it? I can steal it because it's been sat, etc., when it actually means none of that. So if you can have the opportunity, and me, you, and the client need to understand that we have a strategy in mind of how we're selling this property. We're going to try off market. We're just going to ask a number that we all think is right. We might be wrong, we might be right, but it gives everybody else an opportunity to buy something that not everybody else can have. You get your number, the buyer pays what they want to pay, everyone walks away happy. But guess what? If we don't get that number, the most valuable information we just got was from the buyers that came through. Now we listen to that feedback, and now we have the right price to go on the MLS at. So there's no right or wrong way. It's just getting an understanding of what the seller wants, and the seller should have the right to make that decision. There is no blurred line here to me. So
well, you're absolutely right. And also, the most clear and obvious thing here is that the seller isn't forced to take any offer they don't want.
Correct.
So I constantly hear people saying, oh my goodness, if you do this, you could have gotten more if you did this or that. Okay, great. It's, as you said, it's just information. Correct. If you're trying to sell a property and you're pre-marketing it and it's not on the MLS or out to the entire world yet, and someone comes in and says, I will give you that number, you can decide, okay, maybe I'll take that because that's fine. That's all I wanted to accomplish. Or you say, someone is willing to pay this. Maybe my price is right. Great. You know what? I want to put it on the market and I'll maybe get other bids and maybe get more. Who knows? Ultimately, it's just about their choice. No one's forcing someone to sell their home off market, right? Totally. So the whole thing is I think what we're seeing now, though, with Zillow reversing the Zillow ban, which is a major victory for agent choice and seller choice, a major victory, right? The company that was the most against this saying, you know what, this doesn't work. I think we're going to continue to hopefully see people understand like what this is really about, which is choice. That's it.
Totally. Look, we could go on and on and on, but we don't have time. I'm going to ask you a couple of very quick rapid fire questions because I didn't even realize we've been on for nearly an hour here, which is awesome. And then we can wrap it up. But what kind of impact do you hope your leadership has on the next generation of Compass leaders and agents?
Look, I think I hope that they will take from me this idea that if you love something and you're passionate about it and you're willing to work really hard, that anything is possible. You can create anything, and to stay focused and keep going, because there's going to be moments of adversity. The story of Compass and now Compass International Holdings, it's not a linear up and to the right thing, right? In fact, there were so many precarious and difficult moments. Go back to when we weren't in markets and we had to launch there. And then we go back to, trying to raise capital, then COVID, trying to run a company virtually, then going public, and then the real estate market corrects, the war in Ukraine, interest rates spike, all the market completely comes to a standstill. Then we're having to readjust and sort of calibrate and then come out of that and bring people back. I mean, this has been a journey. And so I hope people can see that it's not going to be linear and up and to the right. But if you're passionate, you care, and you love the people you work with, and you work with great people, you can do anything. And there are some people at the company who work with me who I'm starting to see some of that rub off on. And I'm excited because they're going to be that next generation, whether it's agents or employees who take this into the next generation. So
I love that. I love that answer. And you've clearly got an amazing vision, which is, it's amazing to hear and listen. So last question, if you were to look toward the future of Compass, what excites you most?
I'd say a few things. I think one, obviously continuing to advocate for seller choice and agent choice. I think that's going to open up so much more competition, and competition is ultimately the thing that's going to improve the consumer experience. It's going to help agents grow and become better. And I think our business will be incredibly well suited over the coming years if this continues to be a theme. Number two, I'm really excited for all of the agents in the Compass International Holdings ecosystem to be on the same platform, because when everyone's on the same platform, technology gets better the more users it has, right? The network effect is what drives it. So the more users using the platform, the better these tools will get. And ultimately, that's going to help agents grow their business and create better experiences for clients. And three, I'm excited there's a lot of doom and gloom out there about AI. I'm excited for the positive side of it, which is I think we as a company can harness that technology to help improve the experience and make our agents better, make them more effective, make them more efficient. And I don't think we have to resign ourselves to this idea that, well, it's only going to be a bad outcome because of it. People have been saying for a very long time that technology was going to replace agents. That clearly hasn't happened. So the thesis is proven that people want an advisor in this type of transaction. Now, can we make them more and more efficient, make the experience better and better, so that people continue to want an advisor in this experience? And I think we can do that.
Right. You're spot on. 84% of our consumers are using AI, right? So if you're not leaning in and you are an agent, the last thing you want to be is 3 steps behind. Our consumers are so much smarter today than they've ever used to have been. They're calling you, asking you questions they already have the answers for, just to check if you know the answer. Like, really lean in, but utilize AI to become more efficient, to streamline your workflows. Right now, it's a bunch of copy paste between different platforms, but this is a whole nother podcast. We got a lot more to talk about, but we're at an hour here, and I want to be respectful of your time. I guess my final is, years from now, what do you hope people talk about when they talk about you and what you helped build?
Honestly, I just hope people say you made my life better. Changed my life is a high bar. I don't know. That's hard, but I just hope that the agents at the company and their clients and the employees say you helped improve my life in some way. If they're saying that, I will finally actually maybe be able to take a breath
and sleep at night.
Yeah, and sleep at night. Yeah.
That's a great way to end it, Rory. Thank you so much. Look, everyone, Rory's career to me is a reminder that progress does not need to be loud. It needs to be meaningful, right? You've got consistency, preparation, and trust. It compounds over time. So for me, if there's one thing to take away from today, it's that the real advancement comes from staying the course and doing the work every single day. I'm James Harris. This is Rise Above the Ranks. Rory, thank you so much for joining us. And I hope we can continue the conversation very soon. Thank you.
Thank you so much.